Other true stories with an Old West flavor from all parts of America will also be included from time to time. Murray has been writing for some 20 years for the online magazine, Texas Escapes. So sit back and relax, and enjoy these true stories of old Texas. Now, here's Murray.
Howdy folks, I'm glad to be back with you today for another edition of Lone Star Diary. And this one is about Texas outlaw Sam Bass. And the title is Texas Outlaw Sam Bass Inspired Tall Tales. Now Sam Bass was considered by a lot of folks in Texas as a sort of a Robin Hood. He always said that he only stole from the rich and never the poor. But unlike Robin Hood, Sam Bass didn't give any money to the poor. But let's talk about Sam Bass a little bit. I'm going to give you a little bit of history on him. He was only 27 years old when he met his maker, but during his short life, he became the subject of cowboy songs and tall tales which were told around many a campfire in Texas. According to the Handbook of Texas, Sam Bass was born on a farm near Mitchell, Indiana, on July 21st, 1851. He was orphaned before the age of 13 and spent several years being raised by his uncle. After running away from home in 1869, Bass turned up in Rosedale, Mississippi, where he worked about a year in a sawmill. But the young man didn't care much for that kind of work, especially hard work, and he decided to search for fame and fortune in the cattle country of Texas. He came to Denton and worked on a ranch for a while, but once again he didn't like to work, and his dreams of being a cowboy were soon replaced with ideas of how to make easy money. In 1874, Bass got into horse racing. He bought a fast mount dubbed the Denton Mare and started racing in North Texas, winning a little money in that part of the country. He eventually tried his luck in San Antonio, where he wasn't quite as successful. In 1876, he teamed up with a fellow named Joel Collins and drove some cattle herds up to Dodge City. And although they were employed by several Texas ranchers and were supposed to sell the cattle in return with the money, it didn't work out quite that way. Fact is, Bass and Collins kept the money, $8,000 worth, and that was some big money back in those days. And they squandered it all gambling in Ocala, Nebraska, and in the gold mining city of Deadwood, South Dakota. When the money played out, the duo tried their luck in the freight hauling business, but as was their habit with any job where hard work was involved, they simply quit and went back to a life of crime. They gathered up 6 more unscrupulous characters and began to rob stagecoaches and trains. Bass and his gang made their biggest haul when they robbed a Union Pacific passenger train at Big Springs, Nebraska on September 18, 1877. They took $60,000 in newly minted $20 gold pieces from the express car and $1,300 plus 4 gold watches from the passengers. Now, I hope those passengers were wealthy because, Sam Bass wouldn't rob the poor. Yeah, right. The crooks divided up the loot and decided to go in pairs in different directions. Collins and several others were killed while resisting arrest, but Bass made it back to Texas and he put together a new gang of outlaws. Sam Bass and his bandits didn't have near as much success in Texas. They did rob some stagecoaches and trains in the Dallas area, but they didn't get much money. And as I said before, during his short-lived career, Bass got sort of a Robin Hood reputation, and he claimed to have only robbed the rich and never the poor. I find that a little hard to believe, because I believe if old Sam saw a dollar bill in somebody's pocket and he needed it, it wouldn't make it to him whether the guy was rich or poor. On April 4th, 1924, a newspaper in Texas called the Molten Eagle ran an article about old Sam and cited several different tales that were circulating about the man. For instance, there was that time when he offered a young boy a drink of whiskey. The boy refused it, saying, "Mother doesn't allow me to drink." The outlaw sadly answered, "That's right, sonny. Mind your ma. I wouldn't be where I am today if I'd have minded mine." Perhaps the biggest tale about Bass is the one where he was captured by a mob and hanged. A mob, not a mom, and hanged. The men were shooting at his body, and a bullet happened to hit the rope. His body dropped and then rolled into a river. A big rattlesnake was seen crawling away from where Sam's body hit the ground. The lynch mob supposedly dragged the river and found nothing. After returning to town, one member of the posse was asked if the notorious Sam Bass was really dead. "Well, if he wasn't, he ought to be," said the man. "He was shot, hanged, snake bit, and drowned. That ought to be enough." Now, whether this story is really true or not, whether this really happened or not, is anybody's guess. But Sam Bass did survive, although not for long. Given up by an informer, Sam Bass was ambushed and wounded in a gunfight with Texas Rangers while trying to rob a bank in Round Rock, Texas. He managed to escape, but was later found in a pasture north of town. He was brought back to Round Rock and died there on July 21st, 1878. He died on his 27th birthday. What a birthday present for old Sam. The young outlaw who inspired many a song and campfire yarn is buried in Round Rock, not far from where he died. So, that's another one of those Wild West stories about Texas. Sam Bass really lived. He really existed. And he really had a colorful past. But as were most of those young men that come out of the Civil War and got into the bandit and robbing business, they didn't last long. If the cattle work was punching cattle was too rough on them and they turned to a life of crime, they generally did wind up in the sights of a Texas Ranger or some other brave lawman and eventually bit the dust. Well, that's a story about Sam Bass, folks. I hope you enjoyed it. I want to shout out to the people that are listening to this podcast around the world. We got them in Canada, Australia, Europe, India. India is one of our biggest listeners. So thanks again. I'm glad you enjoyed this story about Texas, and I hope you'll return next time and check us out again. Goodbye, everybody, and God bless Texas.